I have we have out here in town country, myself play a little league ball out there. Anyway, we had this kid, this man, his dad was a coach manager. He put so much pressure on his son. He often wanted to send a pitch. His son was a good pitcher. And then his son started getting knocked out. They started singing. And then he started playing on the ground. He didn't like him. One day, he came down to his boss. And his dad said, look, if your son ever commits suicide, you're going to be you're struggling to your wife, do your son, this is abusive. And they follow. We talk
Test one, two.
Look here. Oh, my son played football. We start screaming and threats and stuff, and just havoc all day long. These kids, even college mixture, yeah, my parents are all living their life to kids.
So she made it to the final round, which gave her confidence. But
They got pushed too far too fast. Yeah.
Rather than sitting here, upstairs, I was like, morning.
I forgot we were doing that, but I'm Mr. People today.
Mr. People.
Making my butterfly.
So.
Well, there's some on this table.
At the road job, they get the range, they get like the clubhouse, and all that stuff. They get you make all my money to make this. And we're going to do a project. Like God, they got very deep pitch at UT, and then he tried to go pro, but he threw it in his 80s. Well, they ain't gonna cut it in the road. You can throw batting practice. Oh, David Driver's son already goes in the mid-80s from what he's saying. He's just close. He's really good there.
That's where I think it'd be.
His son's got like 5 different pitches. He throws that's pretty strong too.
Well, there is church is at 10:15, the Sunday school's at 9, and then my head down. Well, yeah, we just have this time as well. Yeah.
Listen here. Sure. In front and center. You have to pay attention.
I didn't do anything on that table, trying to. Well, pointing out this morning, we're looking for pins, because our pen stand is missing.
I have lots.
There,
I'll pen up this table.
Yeah, I found a couple, but,
I got some in my purse.
okay.
But that's why.
I have one.
So I just.
Gave it to. Another one.
I got three for you.
Lots of people have pocketbooks and.
Exactly.
Such great. All right. So that's feel it here. I think I'll send you the order. Well, not you did it right there, but. But I'll be a huge bullshit. They're sidetracked.
Yes.
Oh, it's so much you can say. Yes, stay on that. Patty's here. I'm here with this. I was gonna say. I'm trying to get away. Well, I'm sure
Trying to get away from that.
but I, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna get Tom.
Well,
Well, that's what it's here. Oh. That's the two. Oh, this. How all this happened. From the deer. No, I'm. Alex Jean is right here. Okay, she will have been there.
Oh, where? Yeah.
well,
I didn't say
yeah, and because of
Wait for
temperature,
that.
because of temperature.
Yeah, uh-huh.
Another.
Thank you.
Well, it's where all the babies are.
Yeah, I had to go get mine. Hello, how are you? Yeah.
Here you go.
Back to your grand.
Just.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. I'm going to go on. Yeah. Okay. But they. They're proud. You're so much. Yeah. They usually just like something else. Now. That's. Yeah, it's sort of like building care.
Yeah, it's.
It's about 5 after, so why don't we attempt to get started? All right,
I think this is supposed to be closer. Maybe. Anyway, okay. The Lord be with you. Gracious God, we give you thanks for this beautiful day and for the joy of Easter. Come, Holy Spirit, and be with us. All these things we pray in your Son's name. Amen. All right. So welcome everyone. Come on in. Welcome everyone. We are the theme for this next 4 weeks is even at the grave we make our song, Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. And if you look at your handout on the first page, you'll see this comes from the commendation, which is found in the burial rite of both the rite 1 and rite 2 burial rite. And so you only are immortal, the creator and maker of mankind, and we are mortal, formed of the earth, and to earth shall we return. For so did you ordain when you created me, saying, you are dust, and to dust you shall return. All of us go down to the dust, yet even at the grave we make our song, Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. Give rest, O Christ, to your servant with your saints, where sorrow and pain are no more, neither sign but life everlasting. So the question that we are exploring over these next 4 weeks, our task at hand, what we are hoping to do and make space for among ourselves is how can our death and the events surrounding our death be like a song? And not just any song, an Alleluia song, a resurrection song, a song that magnifies and reflects the grace we have received from God, that extends it beyond ourselves to our family and those we love in our community. A song that sows peace and opens the door to reconciliation and grace for ourselves and the people we love. And that will hopefully echo, that song will continue. People will lean in and hear it after we're gone. So a song in and of itself is a liminal thing, right? It has a beginning, a middle, and an end. A song sort of starts one place and ends in another. And burial liturgies are the same way. They sort of start in one place and end in another. That phrase pass away, that idea of passing, a movement, a sort of liminal space between life and death. We as Christians in our Easter hope have this belief in the saints in light, right? And so we have a sense in which in eternity, in God's eternity and being, we are not separated from those we love, even though we are separated from those we love, right? And so there's a way in which we remain connected. So there are a number of questions that we want to try to grapple with over the next 4 weeks. How might we properly, fittingly celebrate our life? Taking into account our own desires, but also the needs of our family and our friends and our community. A funeral service, a memorial service, etc. You want it to be reflective of you, but at the same time, you're not there in a way, right? It's really for the people that you love, right? And so as you're planning and making arrangements, you want to have them in mind. In our second session, we'll look at more end-of-life issues. How can we support our loved ones through the process of our dying? Should we be blessed and enough to have a process and not have it be a sudden thing? What conversations ought we have now with regards to the end of our life so that we preserve harmony and allow reconciliation? How can the church support us and our families through its rites and its liturgies and its ministry, such as ministration to the sick, ministration at the time of death, after our passing, incorporation in the Eucharist, our life in the body of Christ, and how we care for each other. And how might our life sing on? What do we want to leave for the people we love? Our worldly goods, from photos and letters to grandma's china, to our debts and assets and everything in between. What will our legacy be? How do we want to live on in the life of the church and in the community through the disposition of our worldly goods? And we'll get into more detail about those things. So those are sort of the buckets that we're looking at. There is I meant to put it in the slideshow, but did not. There's a book that I want to highly recommend called Being Mortal, by, I'm going to say it, Atul Gawande, Being Mortal. It is a book about the end of life. And it's really eye-opening. It was for me when I read it. This is just sort of recommended reading for you guys. Atul, A-T-U-L, Gawande, and I don't know that I can spell.
One more, G-A-W-A-N-D-E.
G-A-W-A-N-D-E. Did I get that right? Okay. Anyway, we'll talk more about that next session. But in preparation for next session, it'd be great if you wanted to take a look at that book, or at any time down the road. So today we are looking at what we tend to think of first, or at least I guess maybe because I'm clergy, what I think of first, which is the funeral or memorial service, right? What does that look like? What is it made of? What's it for? We're going to try to dig into a little bit of that today. So today we're looking at that aspect, and we will. So the rites of the church. The rites of the church are meant to carry your loved ones and the community around them through their dealings with grief, give them time and space to realign the family structure, which is now changed, redistribute responsibilities and property so that the family and the community can live on and function and flourish in hope. From the earliest times, and in particular in the Jewish tradition, of course, there are all kinds of rites and ceremonies around the end of life. In the Jewish tradition, there was the tearing of garments, wearing dark clothes or sackcloth, cutting one's hair might be something one would do to mark a mourning. Neighbors bringing food, bread, the cup of consolation, beverages, caring for people so that they don't have to cook and that they're upheld by their friends and family, prayers and rites and liturgies, individual prayer, family prayer, corporate prayer, and then of course going way back in time, sacrifices. 2 turtle doves or whatever it may be, right? Sacrifices given to God. The ark of our service, the ark of Christian burial in the Episcopal Church, it has what we would call a liturgical shape. So what does that shape look like? And so before we go any further, if we could read together the theological note for Liturgy of the Dead, should be on that first page of your leaflet, I believe. Is that correct? All right. So the Liturgy for the Dead is an Easter liturgy. It finds all its meaning in the resurrection. Because Jesus was raised from the dead, we too shall be raised. The liturgy, therefore, is characterized by joy and the certainty that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things present, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God in Christ Jesus our Lord. This joy, however, does not make human grief unchristian. The very love we have for each other in Christ brings deep sorrow when we are parted by death. Jesus himself wept at the grave of his friend. So while we rejoice that the one we love has entered into the nearer presence of our Lord, we sorrow in sympathy with those who mourn. And so that is just a little bit of a liturgical frame for understanding the liturgy of Christian burial. And the shape of that liturgy, classically, although it has changed in modern times, classically, that would begin with spoken anthems, the solemn anthems. So there's an entrance into the church so it starts in solemnity, and as you move through the service, rises and rises and rises toward kind of resurrected Easter joy. However, in recent times, and the prayer book allows for, instead of beginning with spoken anthems into the church or a chanted anthem into the church, which sounds very solemn, you can begin with Joyful, Joyful, We Adore You as an opening hymn, right? And so you can kind of have the shape of the solemnity to joy, but you can also just have joy all the way through, if that is your preference. If you imagine family members kind of going through this activity, the liturgy can do work that I can't really describe except to say it's a little bit of a mystery, which is that the people you love start at the beginning of that service in one place, and at the end of that service, they're in another place. And they don't have to really do anything except participate in the service. And the liturgy does the work. It helps them name what has happened. It helps them remember and celebrate the one they love. It gives them space to think about it. Even prior to the service, the planning and the work and the things that they put together and do in order to have that service come to pass can be very helpful for them to have something to focus on. To have something to do. And even if you plan your service down to the last, most minute detail, they still have stuff to do. They'll still have to order the flower. They'll still be dealing with people. They'll still have plenty to do. But that having something to do can be a great gift to them. Anyway, so the service is primarily for the living, but it should be something that you would like and that reflects who you are. So as we're moving through this, think of this as a dance between your desires and what your families and friends would take comfort in. Anyway, and I'll just make one other note, if you have extensive requests, then you sort of have an obligation to provide for those expensive requests. So if you want a 5-piece brass, musical ensemble, you need to put that, and you need to figure that out. They might not be able to make that happen for you without your help. So let the liturgy do some work. As you move through your leaflet, you'll also see concerning the service, Book of Common Prayer, pages 468 and 490. And this is in your prayer book. This is just a reminder of kind of what here are the sort of rules, guidelines. These are the things that sort of we adhere to. And I think it's helpful to remember. So the death of a member of the church should be reported as soon as possible to, and arrangements made for the funeral in consultation with the minister of the congregation. So when someone dies, please call the church. And in fact, if the person is ill and And on your death, please call the church, because if desired, clergy, I mean, this is what you went, this is why we got into this, right? Is to go be at the bedside of those who are dying. And we want to be there. It's an honor for us to be there. You're not putting a burden on the clergy by asking for that. We really want to be there for you and for your family. So let us know. Christians are properly buried from the church. And the service should be held at a time when the congregation has an opportunity to be present. The coffin is closed before the service and remains closed thereafter. So even if you have a wake or a viewing or something, that's fine. But once the service begins, the coffin is closed. It is covered with a pall, which is a large piece of fabric that represents our baptismal garment. So it is white, like a baptismal garment, which is a kind of, and when we wear the alb on the altar, all of those are ways of kind of, one's individual identity recedes a little bit, and one's identity as God's beloved child is sort of put forward. Does that make sense? That becomes the identity that is proclaimed. You'll also notice that there's titles and sort of accomplishments and things like that tend to be not lifted up as high. We're all children in the sight of the Lord, kind of, and this is a moment where that is proclaimed more than this person was a judge or whatever. All those kinds of things tend to happen next to the service, at the reception or prior to or at a viewing or those types of things. Of course, there are always exceptions to this. Anyway, okay. This prayer book is the first prayer book that acknowledges cremation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. A committal is what happens at the very end of the service is when the remains are committed to their place of rest, be that a columbarium or a burial plot, whatever it may be. Some people keep the remains of their loved one with them, in which case there isn't a committal. Does that make sense? A priest would normally preside, but if one is not available, a deacon or layperson can officiate at a funeral. It's desirable that the lessons be read by lay people. They have some recommendations in the case of the burial of a child. The celebrant of the service or officiant of the service will always meet the body, whether that be in a casket or an urn, as it arrives to the church, and special prayers are said upon the arrival. Anyway, so that is basically just a little overview of sort of what the prayer book says about how this is supposed to go. If you get to this sheet that says modern shifts. Done with slides. The prayer book really imagines, welcome y'all. The prayer book really imagines. So kind of because of our English roots, where you have a church and next to the church, there's literally a graveyard. That's kind of, even now, that is sort of how the liturgy is expected to function. So that, so it imagines that you've got ministration to the dying. So clergy have been present with the person, if possible, before they've died. The clergy are present for the reception of the body, or layperson, that's the case. The reception of the body to the church, the burial office taking place at the church, the commendation, which is a part of the burial office, which is when we commend our loved one into the arms of God. So the final commendation prayer is, into your hands, O merciful Savior, we commend your servant. Acknowledge, we humbly beseech you, a sheep of your own fold, a lamb of your own flock, a sinner of your own redeeming. Receive him into the arms of your mercy. So this is a kind of like, this is a return to God and a release moment. And it comes toward the end of the service. This whole section, which is on the front page of your handout, comes from an Eastern Byzantine rite of the 7th century. So these words, give rest, O Christ, to your servant with your saints, where sorrow and pain are no more, and neither sighing nor life everlasting. And even at the grave, we make our song, Alleluia, 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 have been said for over 1,000 years. But there are some modern shifts, and a commendation technically is only said when the either the cremains or the casket are present. Technically, I say it no matter what. And I had dinner with Bishop Doyle and Kay Ryan, and they disagreed about whether or not whatever, and they both sort of said, well, you know. So I'm going with, well, whatever. So I think they're maybe the prettiest words in the whole thing. And I just feel like whether the body's right there or somewhere else, it doesn't really matter. It's more important to say these words. So I always say them. But there may be another priest who's more of a stickler and who would not. Cremation is much more common even than it was in 1979 when this prayer book was put together. I would say 75%, maybe more, of the funerals that I do are cremation and not a casket. Committals, which is when you put the body to rest, now often precede the celebration of life or funeral or occur at a much later date. So often a family may want to have a graveside committal prior to the memorial service or funeral, or they may want to meet in the columbarium and put the person to rest prior to. It may be that they are not going to be able to have the funeral until Thanksgiving when everybody's in town. And so they want to go ahead and lay the person to rest and have the committal maybe several months before the celebration of life. All of that is permissible. And then again, the other reverse is true. Not usually if there's a body, but in the case of cremains, that can be very true as well. So you've had the funeral, you've had the burial office, and then the cremains either aren't ready yet, or they go home with the family waiting on others to be able to come, and then they will do that as a separate rite. That's not how the prayer book imagines it. The prayer book imagines that we're having the funeral, we're walking out the door, we're going to the grave cemetery that's right next door, and this is all of a piece and fits together as a piece. We have a columbarium, which means that if that is where you're going to be laid to rest, we can actually follow what the prayer book imagines, because we can just walk down the aisle and go out to the columbarium and do all of that. The committal itself is very, very short. And so if there's going to be like a graveside only service, often you have to kind of beef that up a little bit with a little bit more liturgy. Funerals and burials, and this is very much a result of, I think, COVID. Funerals and burials often happen following a much longer interval of time. So there used to be, this kind of urgency that someone would pass away and you would want to have a funeral within 7 days or something like that. That has changed a lot in recent times, even just in the short time I've been a priest. That has changed a lot. And I think COVID had a lot to do with that shift in people's minds. And I'm a little ambivalent about it. I think sometimes it's wonderful that especially if the grief is very, very acute and people are really suffering, sometimes they need a minute and not need to feel rushed to accomplish this thing in a hurry. And so it's nice to be able to say, it's okay to take your time and figure it out. On the flip side, you can take too much time. And then you've been left to kind of manage your grief over a long period of time without the ministry of the church to help you, support you, and help you kind of move through the process. So I think it's one of those things that is very individual, but I just name it because I think it's important. Eulogies are now incorporated into the service. In the Rite One liturgy, a homily may be offered. There is no provision for a eulogy. We break that rubric all the time. And eulogies being a part of an Episcopal service is a newer thing. The priest would offer homily and would speak about the person, but sort of having cousin Nancy or whoever come up and talk, that is newer, but many churches do it that way. And so as we become more kind of ecumenical, it's just part of how that is definitely allowed. The inclusion of communion varies very much by parish, by the culture of the parish, and by the needs of the people. So a burial office can happen without communion. It goes from sort of the liturgy of the word, if you will, and then it goes into that commendation. Depending on how much music you have and how long your eulogies and whatnot are, you're looking at a 30 to 45-minute service without communion, and you're looking at a service of an hour and 10 minutes with communion, depending on how many people are there and that sort of thing. So communion's very much up to you if you're going to do this advanced work. Keep in mind who's likely to be present at this service. And I realize who would be present at the service when you're 55 is different than who would be present at the service when you're 65, 75, 85, 95. So you have to kind of think that way too. You know, this may change. This is not written in stone. But for that judge or superintendent, like for people that are really large figures in the community that are going to gather a large amount of people, many of whom may not be Christian, one might not want to have communion at that service. One might want to have a separate communion service for family, or something like that, right? You may want to just think about if you're in a family with, where you might have a large number of Jewish relatives. Again, these are just things to be conscious of in terms of what kind of service you want to plan for yourself. The other reason not to have communion, in the same way, if someone is much younger when they die, the people who come to the service really will, because we consider that tragic. And it is. And so different kinds of people come to that kind of service, right? So if school, different professional, you're still very in a different place in your life. And so different types of folks will come when a service happens, when someone's younger. People at the service may have little or no familiarity with the rite itself. They may have never been to a funeral. They may have never been to an Episcopal funeral in particular. So keep that in mind as well, right? And so as you're thinking of hymns, as you're thinking of what you want to include, just bear in mind the stranger, the outsider, the one who doesn't know. And weirdly, I will say that funerals are strangely evangelical moments. I know that probably sounds really, really strange, but the liturgy is so beautiful. The preaching's usually pretty darn good. And people come and they experience a depth and a comfort that they're not accustomed to or thinking that they're gonna experience. And so when they experience it, they're like, wow, anyway, I need to talk faster, y'all. I'm running, all right. Things Episcopalians do not generally do. We generally do not have recorded music. I made this mistake once and had somebody sing along to recorded music. And the altar guild at that church would not speak to me for several weeks. But I will say, in retrospect, it was indeed a mistake. We don't generally have pictures in the sanctuary. So in the narthex, down in the parish hall, other places, but we don't generally have pictures in the sanctuary. We don't generally have slideshows in the sanctuary. Long eulogies or lots of eulogies, we don't generally have, and they are better placed, honestly, at the wake or reception, or, there are lots of attendant things, right, that are different than the funeral itself, and they usually go better there. We generally don't have non-scriptural writings included in the liturgy. Although, depending on a clergy person, if a poem is fitting or a piece of something is particularly fitting, then, depending on the clergy, they may or may not allow that. Okay, moving on. Let's skip forks in the road for a second and go down to costs. So church estimates, I just thought this might be helpful for people to have in mind. So a kind of like really full, everything's pretty awesome funeral is about $1,600. That is flowers, Daughters of the King reception, clergy honorarium, sexton, live stream, organist, and vocalist. That's like the full Monty, if you will, right? But on the kind of lower end there, right? You can have flowers, clergy, sexton, organist, without a reception, without live stream, without congregational singing, and it's going to be $800 to $900. If you wanted to do something really grand, right? You could do really big flowers, really big reception, clergy, sexton, live stream, and then really big music is as big as you can. I mean, it could be as much as, it's as big as you want to make it, right? So just bear that in mind. Music becomes a very important component here. Funeral homes vary greatly, depending on what your desires are. Cremation versus casket, embalming and dressing, transportation. There's the transportation of the body, but there's also the transportation of the people. So do you want a police escort and limousines? Or is that not what you want? All those things kind of need to be taken into account. And of course, they all sell, pre-plans. But I think it's good to have some idea of kind of what you want and what it will cost. Staff attendance, use of one of their locations for a viewing or a wake or a party, etc. All those things cost different amounts. A little information about St. Luke's on the Lake Columbarium. So for $2,500, that is a niche. That is how much a niche costs. And two interments, two urns can fit in a niche. And the stone is engraved with enough room for two people. So you can have one person in a niche, you can have two people in a niche, but you can't have more than two people in a niche. Included with the niche comes the cost of engraving the stone and two urns that come with the niche. So it's a bargain. It sounds weird saying that, but it really, when you look at other options out there, it really is, it's really very, very good. In addition to that, I'm sorry, it's gallows humor, I don't know. Anyway, in addition to that, we do also have the wall plate. So each square, of stone has 4 spots. Those are $250 each. So if you were to, I don't know, cast your ashes into the sea, you know, next to Jamaica or something, I don't know, whatever. If you were gonna do something like that, but you wanted a place for your name to be, then you don't need a niche for your cremains, then you could purchase one of those squares. If you could purchase a whole, all 4 of them for $1,000 and reserve them. Brad, correct me if I'm wrong, and reserve them if you thought, for example, you wanted your whole family to be able to kind of be in one spot together. For more information about that, I suggest that you call the office and we can walk you through that process. There are a limited number of all of those things. So if this is something that you would like, this is a fairly easy thing that you could make arrangements for. Burial plots and other interment locations, of course, vary greatly in terms of the cost of those things. Also, a modern shift would be green burial. It's becoming a much more desired option for folks. And when that is the case, the funeral does need to happen fairly quickly. And then usually the body is either wrapped in a shroud, wrapped in cloth and buried directly in the ground, or placed in a very simple pine box kind of coffin, a very, very simple coffin, and buried in the ground. And there's no embalming or any other, the body is generally washed and, you know, prepared in that way. But other than that, nothing else is done to the body. And there is a growing interest and desire for that kind of burial these days. All right, if you keep going, in your handout, we will now get to this funeral planning annotated document. So this is a version of the document that the clergy use when they sit down with the family to plan your funeral. And I thought it would be helpful for you all to see this. You can use it as a little worksheet if you would like. And it's not quite ready to be published yet, but we are working on a woo-foo form that you can complete online, and we will print it and place it in a folder with your name, and we will keep a hold of those so that you can have your funeral plans on file with the church. And then, you know, I don't know, that way, if you pass, we've got something we can share with your loved ones and say, here's what they wanted. And then, you know, there's just a couple, you know, you won't know, or maybe you will, I don't know. but clergy are different, right? So the way that they, you know, how, you know, permissive they are or not permissive they are varies from clergy to clergy. So you just need to be aware of that. You can't count on me being here, although I hope I will be. I mean, you know, but things change. Y'all know that, right? People come and go, different things happen. That's out of our control. You can request a particular preacher to come, or you can request another clergy person to come, but that's going to be at the discretion of the rector, if that's allowed. There's some good pastoral reasons for, I'm not planning on going anywhere. I'm planning on being here a really, really long time. But let's say I was to depart in the next year or so for some reason, and a new rector came to St. Luke's. There is a period of time at which I must have a kind of pastoral separation from the congregation, where it gets very muddy for the new person to have another pastor coming in and pastoring, right? So just keep all of that in mind. So if you get to the funeral planning annotated version, The name of the deceased as it should appear on the service leaflet, so the full name of the person. And in the leaflet, there are parts where it's just the first name. So this is actually important. People have married names, maiden names, middle names. It's really worth thinking through what do you want your name to be on the front of this leaflet, as well as engraved, on, and then what nickname would you want, in the, or first name would you want to use? So for example, someone's name might be Patricia, and they may go by Patricia, Pat, or Patty, and may go by all three depending on the context, right? So they're Patty with their family, they're Pat with their friends, they're Patricia when they got in trouble with their grandma. Right, and so what's that? And so when we're saying, welcome your servant, Patty or Patricia, what are we saying at that moment? What do you want said at that moment? So that's something you can name and declare for yourself. Date of birth, date of death, place of death, cause of death. These are all really, I mean, obviously you're not going to know that when you're using this worksheet, but this is in the burial book that we have. All of those things are asked for, and cause of death. You really saw this. Church records are these. They're these funny things, right? I mean, people go back and look at them because they sort of tell something about what's happening in the world at a given point in time. If you watch the genealogy shows or whatever, right? I mean, church records are where they figure out a lot of things. We saw this with COVID in particular, right? So cause of death is really, the fact that those are recorded and COVID was recorded as the cause of death is, I don't know, 100 years from now, someone can look and be like, oh, wow, that was what was happening, right? And so that's why that's there. Family contacts, who is likely to be in charge of the arrangements after you die? Try to name 2 people. The funeral home, if you have one picked out, having some kind of plan in place. Memorial acknowledgements are also really important. So people may make a gift to the endowment fund in your name or to the church in your name. And when they do that, when they make that gift in your name, then a card is sent to whoever you tell us to send it to, so the card is then sent to your children or whomever would want to know that this is happening. Does that make sense? So that's very, very helpful. Then we'll move to the next section here. And now we're really getting to some of the bigger picture items. And you get to take this home and think about it and all this stuff, but date of service, time of service, estimated number of leaflets. Funerals are much smaller than they used to be. They are much, much smaller than they used to be. I don't know if that's a COVID hangover. I don't know what that is. I'm just telling you, they're just smaller. The big forks in the road, one thing you'll have to decide is write 1 or write 2, right? Write 1 being the more traditional language. Will you have a Eucharist or not? Those are both really big and important things. Will the service take place at the church, graveside, funeral home, etc.? And then the internment date, that is where the body or remains will be laid to rest. Where if you will have a reception, don't worry about the personnel section. And now flip over to the next page, which says the service or entrance rite. So this is how the service will begin, either with anthems or a hymn or both, in procession, in place. Each rite 1 has 1 collect provided. Rite 2 gives you a choice of 3. The clergy is generally gonna do all that work for you. They're gonna help you help your loved one sort of choose what the right and fitting thing to do is. But music becomes really important at this point. And so And so I would have, I don't know, a list of 6 hymns, songs picked out if you plan to have music in your service. The other thing that I have instituted at St. Luke's, and this is because funerals are so small now and not everybody knows the music, is that if you're going to have congregational singing, if you wish the congregation to sing and not just have instrumental music, then you also need to hire a vocalist, a soloist to lead the music. The choir is not generally at a funeral, right? They serve on Sundays, they don't generally serve during the week, and so there isn't anyone to lead the music. And there is nothing less joyful than the organist playing joyful, joyful. And 50 people are in the room and 10 of them are singing, and it sounds anemic and really not joyful. You know what I'm saying? It just does not work. It's not, I mean, it's like kind of breaks your heart when it happens. So if you have a vocalist to help lead the music, even if the congregation doesn't get into it, they're more likely to get into it if someone's there to lead them. And even if they didn't, it doesn't matter because you've got somebody who can sing it for you. Okay. So service of the word. So these are the readings that happen. So that the prayer book has, if you were to open your prayer book to the burial office, well, because we're running out of time, I'm gonna just, you all have prayer books at your thing, open them up. There are suggested readings, Old Testament suggested readings, 2 sets of Psalms, New Testament suggested readings, Gospel suggested readings. You can choose from the whole Bible. These are just kind of classic things that are recommended by the prayer book, but you really can choose what you would like. So if you were to have the maximum number of readings, you would have an Old Testament reading followed by a Psalm, a New Testament reading followed by a Psalm, and a Gospel reading. That would be 5 readings. That would be a lot of readings. And you might have music interspersed in between those as well. You must have at least 1 reading. And if you are having communion, one of those readings must be from the Gospel, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Got to pick one from there, okay? And all the recommended ones are from John. Anyway, so that's something to think about, right? That's another point in the service where if length is important to you, right? If you bear in mind that the more readings you have, the longer the service will be. The other thing to bear in mind and think about now is who might you like to have read? Do you have your children, grandchildren, spouses, etc.? Would you like to have a eulogy or not? That's next on the list. Homily, sermon, the clergy person would offer that. The Apostles' Creed is optional. Some people, if a gathering is going to be particularly interfaith, will choose not to have the Apostles' Creed. The Lord's Prayer, and the prayers of the people. You will notice that there is an offering of an alternative prayer of the people, which is actually found in the vigil in the ministration to the dying. The Rite One prayers to people are beautiful and long, but not very personal at all. The Rite Two prayers to the people were written in the 70s. I don't know what else to say. They're a little, I don't love them. You might love them, I don't love them. The ones I love are the ones on page 465. And they go great with a Rite One or a Rite Two service, and you have the option to use that. And that is in the prayer book, it's allowed. I'm not breaking the rules. Did you have a question? I thought, Leslie, anyway. But anyway, okay, communion, if you're gonna have communion, which Eucharistic prayer, these are things, again, the clergy's probably gonna have an opinion about. If you have an opinion, though, you're welcome to kind of put it in your wishes. The commendation, the procession out, so music notes, because I think music is critically important. Options for music include no music, best for small gatherings. Sometimes you can just have a spoken word service with no music, and it's lovely and can be quite beautiful, especially, you can use a kind of different setting. You can come up around the altar, you could have it in the columbarium, you could do a number of different things, but you could have a service with no music and it would be okay. Organ only, without congregational singing, just instrumental music will be beautiful. Organ and a vocal leader. Additional instruments or vocalists, so violin or saxophone or flute or what, cello, or other vocalists singing. The choir does not typically serve at a funeral. Additional singers and instruments are welcome. Not all music must be sung by the congregation. So there may be pieces, Ave Maria, or a particular piece of music that you just really love that is, choral, right? Fancy, that a congregation won't be able to sing, but the hired soloist will. Don is great at putting us in touch with vocalists as well as instruments. And we have resources, we can find people, particularly in the kind of classic arena of music, right? Where we'll have more trouble is if you want to get funky, because we don't know that many people, but we know some. So anyway, so you can have a soloist, and on, different pieces could be sung differently. So music not from the hymnal 1982 is again the discretion of the rector, right? So I can't speak for every rector. I will allow music that isn't from the hymnal 1982, provided we have the musicians to execute it in a way that it will sound good. Does that make sense? So if you want something on guitar, we gotta be able to find a guitar player. If you like, we have to be able to have, if you're gonna do it, it has to sound good. So that's just something to bear in mind, right? Like, yeah, and as you're making your wishes known, I think it's okay to put music that isn't in hymnal 1982 in there. It's okay with me. Just know that, the person down the road may be like, we're not doing On Eagle's Wings, or we're not doing, there are some really classic songs that people love, right? And that aren't in the hymnal. So I don't know, I'm a more flexible person, but not everybody is, so keep that in mind. The other thing is, some music can be executed beautifully on an organ and some music just simply cannot. And so you're looking at another expense and you're looking at the ability to do that well. So I know that was a lot of information. Questions? Yes.
Could you repeat the question?
Can you tell me the difference between a funeral and a memorial service? So in the prayer book, it's called the burial office, and I believe it is both a funeral and or memorial service. I think funeral implies more of a religious connotation, and memorial service has a more secular connotation, so that people would come kind of with maybe an expectation that it's less religiously centered. The other distinction you might make between the two is that a funeral would have the body present in some form, either remains or a casket, and a memorial service is a service in which there are no remains present. But the liturgy is essentially the same. So there's that, at least from our standpoint. Any other questions? Yes.
I have two other books on death. I highly recommend. One is Surviving Death,
Surviving Death.
written by Charles Myers. He was the chaplain at St. David's Hospital for years. Excellent, excellent.
Charles Myers, did y'all hear that? Okay. Chuck Myers.
Chuck, yeah, well,
Okay.
Chuck, if you're reading one of his yeah, anyway, the other one is the Also Life. Her, and it's Barbara Cawthorn, I believe, I'm not.
Barbara Cawthorn, the
I believe
also life.
It's called the Also Life,
Okay.
because she's an Episcopal priest, retired. And she, instead of afterlife, she also refers to it as the Also Life. So she considers, you're just considering, you're continuing on in a different phase of your existence. So both of these are very, very good. Also,
right, and also with you, also.
as opposed to that.
Well, y'all, it has been a pleasure. There's more to come. Patrick and I are gonna meet next week as well. Looking more at those, end of life, end of care issues. And I don't think I emphasized this earlier, but, you know, having been around this for a bit now. Families come in all shapes and sizes, and they're all different. And, conflict at this time is not fun, right? So part of this whole series is for you to have the chance to think about who's in your family and who are your people, and how are they going to behave towards each other, and how are they going to behave towards you, and what can you do to create harmony and reconciliation and peace, and allowing for as much love to be in the room with you and with them and at the service. And this is a way to begin that process, right? And most families don't have that issue, but I've seen enough families that do, and this is not the moment when you want that to kind of rise to the surface, right? So I'm just telling it like it is. Yes, ma'am.
Is this being recorded or is this?
Well, I thought it was gonna be today, but did it get recorded? Yes, it's recorded.
Okay,
yeah.
because I'm not gonna be here.
Okay,
Sometimes,
okay, yeah, and we'll save your handouts and all of that, and if you would like, how about if I do a little sign-in sheet here, and then when that RUFU form's ready or whatever, we can send also handouts and materials. So if you want me to email you things, I'll just put it right here. Sorry. RUFU's just an online form, like a Google form, or, you know, just a thing that you can use to capture information and then, yeah.
Yeah, okay, before everybody leaves, I just want to ask.
Before you all leave, I just want to ask collectively. Next Wednesday morning is my interview with the committee for the diaconate. We're finally there. So if you would keep me in your prayers Wednesday morning, it's supposed to be at 10:30. Thank you.